As a child, he suffered and endured unimaginable, unspeakable abuse. He's here to tell his story, what happened, how it impacted him, and how it drives what he does today. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Today radio show. I'm your host. My name's John J. Wiley. In addition to being a radio broadcaster, I'm a retired police sergeant. For the latest news articles and much more, check out our website, letradioshow.com. In the Law Enforcement Today show, we'll be joined by special guests. We'll be talking about their experiences and issues affecting law enforcement officers, first responders, their families, their community, and victims of horrendous crimes. Be sure to like us on Facebook. Our page is Law Enforcement Today Radio Show. Check out the daily articles on our website, letradioshow.com. And while you're there, download our free app. The Law Enforcement Today show was brought to you by 4patriots.com. That's the number 4patriots.com. They offer the world's best survival food, the Patriot Power Generator 2000X and more. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use code LET to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store. You'll also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order. Plus, free shipping on orders over $97. And a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com. That's a number 4patriots.com. Use code LET to get 10% off. All right, connecting with us from Salt Lake City, Utah area, we have Jimmy Toro on the phone. Jimmy was sexually abused as a child, and this is a really tough as nails conversation we're going to have. He's here to talk about what happened, how it impacted him, his progress, and most importantly, how it drives what he does today. His website, JimmyToro.com. That's spelled JimmyToro.com. And he's also author of the book, Healed. Jimmy, thanks for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
This is a really tough conversation to have, and we have them all the time on the Law Enforcement Today show. I want people to understand this. I'm a retired police officer. I saw things that made no sense. I still can't wrap my head around some of these things. And we talk about child abuse. We talk about physical abuse, sexual abuse, where children are brutalized. I really cannot comprehend it. And I don't have a point of comparison. I can tell you from my experience investigating it, but that's the only reference I have.
Yeah.
It's tough. And by the way, people love to throw out the term, I'm a little messed up because of what my parents did, or because of this, or trauma from my childhood. And I'm not here to fault that and say it didn't exist. However, a lot of people tend to use that. Your story is an extreme example of this, isn't it?
I would say it is, yes.
Yeah, that's the only way to say it. Look, how do you have a conversation about this without getting to the point where people freak out and say, I don't want to listen to this anymore?
Well, it helps to understand a little bit about the levels of trauma and the levels of the perpetrators who do this to children. They basically are sadists, meaning they enjoy inflicting pain on other people, but they're worse than that. They're cowards. They choose the little children to do this.
Well, so they actually children don't fight back. Children can't hurt them.
Children don't fight back. When they're threatened, they don't say anything, and they can't fight back physically or mentally.
Right,
and for the most part.
As a parent, it's my job to protect them. As a member of society, it's my job, my obligation to protect them as well.
Yes.
One of the things that, and people love to say, you're kind of an old-fashioned dad. You're kind of a strict guy. Well, yeah, my daughter's in her 30s now, and they both turned out okay. But there were a couple. I'll just paraphrase. There was a guy who called my house. He was in his late 20s, and he called for my daughter, who was 15. And I was like, what's going on? She told me, and I grabbed the phone, and I told this guy, under no uncertain terms, never call here again, and do not show your face anywhere near here.
Yeah. Well, I would say let's talk briefly about the different levels of abuse. You could have the classic father who beats his child, right? And then you could take it further and have the father who rapes his child. That's a lot worse, definitely. And then you have the ritualistic sadist abusers, sexual abusers, who organize into groups and they perform their rituals and this and that, and a big part of their ritual is literally sacrificing children. And they do this, and they are in our communities, and they hide. Many people ask me, well, if this is going on in my community, how come I don't know about it? Well, they are really, really good at hiding what they do and covering it up.
Well, you got to be. Otherwise, you get discovered. And when you get discovered, it's game over.
It's game over, that's for sure. And these individuals are driven. They are as addicted as a coke addict would be addicted to cocaine. These pedophiles, these creeps, I don't have enough awful words for them. They wake up every morning and they plot to steal, abuse, and often even kill your child. That's what they do. And people have a hard time believing that, but it's happens a lot. And I was caught up in that kind of ring where another thing about abuse that's interesting is that if you're a little kid and you're abused by one of these abusers, and right on the heels of that, you have the opportunity to go to a place that's safe. Maybe an uncle abused you and you went to your mom and your mom provided this safety. You can release that trauma. You don't have to carry it with you. Because the number one thing a little kid wants when abused is safety, by far, number one. Well, if you don't have that, or your parents were your abusers, as in my case, you will hold all that trauma into your whole system. And you may hold that for decades, in my case, decades and decades. And the whole thing about PTSD, then there's CPTSD. It's not uncommon for men who go through all that to literally have no memory of it, and then in their early 50s, it comes tumbling back with a vengeance. And not just the memory comes back, all the fears, all the sights, all the sounds. When you were little and you were abused horribly, and you had that panic attack, that fight and flight, adrenaline rushing and cortisol rushing through your body, that all comes back. And it is horrific, and you feel every bit of it as an adult when it comes tumbling back. And you got to figure out how to deal with that. That's tough.
Were you one of the people that you came to realizations you remembered stuff in your 50s, like you said?
Well, yes, and sometimes something can trigger when it comes back. Other times, like in my case, no trigger, no nothing, just bam. And when the memories started coming back, they started trickling in. So also in my case is interesting is that for 14 years I had these physical episodes attack me, and they were awful. I would be uncontrollably shaking like a massive panic attack. I'd feel like I was literally dying. And my heart would just be racing, my mouth would be dry, my whole body would be uncontrollably shaking, and I didn't have no memory of these. For 14 years, I dealt with these like 2 or 3 times a week, thousands of these. And then in my 15th year, so that started when I was 45. I'm almost 60 now. And last year, the memories came back, and for almost a year, most of last year, it was one memory after another, after another, after another. And, man, they tear you apart physically. I mean, stress is bad for your body, period.
It's horrible for you.
These are ultimate stress over and over and over. And by the time I got through a year of these, I was surprised I was still alive. My body was so weak, terribly weak.
We're talking with Jimmy Toro. Jimmy, by the way, was sexually abused as a child, and we'll go into that in a few moments. And we'll talk more about how this impacted him, his journey, the progress he's made, and how that drives his mission to help others today. His website is jimmytoro.com. It's JIMMITORO.com. And he's author of the book Heal. When we return, we're going to talk more about this. And if you think predators don't exist, they do. And they wreak havoc and pain on people indiscriminately. And we're going to talk eventually about what you need to be on the lookout for as a parent, grandparent, or concerned citizen. This is Law Enforcement Today Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. January marked the third time a power station in North Carolina was damaged by gunfire. Authorities are saying the attack raises a new level of threat. Imagine a blackout lasting not days, but weeks or months. Your life would be frozen in time right at the moment the power fails. Lights over the country would go out, throwing people into total darkness. That's why having your own solar power is more important than ever. With a new Patriot Power Generator 2000X, you get a solar generator that doesn't install into your house because it's portable. You can take it with you, even use it inside, but it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, or even your fridge. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use code LET to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the Patriot Power Generator. You'll also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order. Plus, free shipping on orders over $97, and a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com. That's the number 4patriots.com and use code LET to get 10% off. That's 4patriots.com. Use code LET to get yours today.
I am Meg Marie O'Rourke from Harmony with Food. Do you ever wonder what foods you should or should not be consuming based on your own unique needs? At Harmony with Food, we are now able to determine exactly what foods we should or should not be consuming through advanced testing. Test, don't guess is the motto at Harmony with Food's BioUnique Boutique program. It has never been easier than now to determine what food, drinks, and supplements you need for your individualized needs. Head over to harmonywithfood.com and click on the testing tab.
Return conversation with Jimmy Toro on the Law Enforcement Today show. Jimmy was sexually abused as a child, and that's an understatement. We're here to talk about his journey, what happened to him, the impact on him, how he made progress, and most importantly, how it drives what he does today to help others. His website is jimmytoro.com. It's JIMMI Toro.com, and he's also author of the book Heal. One thing I got to revisit, Jimmy, with you is predators. When we talk about human predators or predators in the wild, what they do is they pick on either elderly, infirmed, sick, injured, or young. Because, let's use lions as an example. A lion won't pick on a healthy gazelle because if a gazelle kicks and breaks his jaw, it's a death sentence for the lion. So many of these predators, many of these sexual sadist predators deliberately target children because children can't fight back and can't harm them. Am I wrong on that?
Oh, you're more than right on that. And they are masters at it. I mean, for instance, these creeps will show up at a mall and they will sit there and watch little kids walk by, and they know which kids are vulnerable. They know which kids are looking down, possibly look depressed, possibly look like they don't have a good home life, and et cetera. They'll even use kids their own age. They'll pay another 14-year-old boy, let's say, money to go befriend a certain kid to entice that kid. They entice them with money, with opportunities, modeling opportunities. They are so clever. They have all these tricks of getting to these kids online. If you're a parent and you have a 10-year-old kid and you give that kid unlimited access to the internet on their phone, it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah. Well, my day, you and I had to worry about the person down the street or the guy with the van. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's someone we know, someone very close to us that does these sorts of things. Nowadays, we've got those same concerns, but we really have the internet, games, chat rooms, all that stuff that people need to be aware of.
Yes, yeah. So limiting your kids' access to that is a really smart idea. You know, people also need to know that in so much abuse, most of the time, the child who's abused is abused by somebody they know. You know, a parent, an uncle, a friend of a parent, etc. Like a high 90%. And so the other thing about kids in this type of abuse is if a kid says that they're being abused or treated wrong, they are right. Do not doubt them. They don't lie about this kind of stuff. And yet the abuser tries to get that kid to lie, to say, well, this is a special bond we have just between you and I. You can't tell anybody. And often, believe it or not, often it's grandparents in the kid's life who discover this.
Yeah, and one of the things you just said that really is important, and we were trained this from the very beginning days of the academy.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what age it was. I'm going to paraphrase. Let's say below the age of 12. Children don't think sexually. When they tell you things like this happen, it's almost a guaranteed sign that it did.
Yes. Yeah, and they talk about it matter-of-factly sometimes, like this is normal. If it happens a lot, it's awful.
There's so much that goes on behind the scenes. By the way, my wife and I are watching a show on, I believe it's Investigation Discovery or A&E or one of them. It's called Underage Undercover. And the whole premise of the show is they're going after adults who target children for sexual gratification. And it's all online. And some of these they're married, a lot of them. They are military. They're every walk of life, and they're actually driving to meet 12, 13-year-old girls and boys to have sex with them. And that's where they usually arrest them. Before that, it's getting the evidence they're committing crimes. That's very interesting because in any given community, I can, without proving this, I can almost guarantee you that there definitely are predators in your community. It's not how many, or if, or this kind of thing. They are there. In my town, in the last year, a mayor got busted for this, an ex-attorney general, a coach at a high school, a soccer coach, etc. Just a few weeks ago, a guy had opened a gym for teaching young kids gymnastics, and he got busted. He had cameras hidden in the bathrooms. These creeps, another thing to know about them is they gravitate towards youth and kids. Right. They will become employees at orphanages. They will they will become coaches. They will gravitate towards youth positions at churches. They go where the kids are. And so whatever group your kid is out there in the world, be really careful that these predators might be part of the organization that your kids go to. And I don't want people to look, there's a lot of things I didn't talk about as a cop to my now ex-wife, Jimmy, because I didn't want people to really be afraid of the threats out there. And number one. Number two, they were already worried about me to begin with. But sometimes the boogeyman lived right next door to you, and they're capable of doing really horrible, horrible things to people. I got to ask this, and when you're talking earlier about these predators, the picking on children, targeting children, the first thing I thought of was Adam Walsh disappearing and his father. And for people who don't think this occurs, I don't know what's going to be a wake-up call. You got to be aware that it happens daily across the United States. Well, the other thing to note about this, too, is that many of these predators organize in crime rings. And so, for instance, if you have a person who opens up a brothel and their customer comes in, pays them money, and so they can go have sex with a prostitute, well, these type of same organizations exist with children. These creeps, these pedophiles can go in and they can order, let's say, a 4-year-old blonde boy or a 6-year-old Asian girl. Well, these kids who are part of these rings, a girl could literally get raped thousands of times over years and years and years, and then either get worn out. Sometimes they kill the kids, and so the kids are coming into their evil organizations. Some age out, or etc. So they need to continually replenish their stock of kids for these creeps. And they're on the lookout in your community to find a kid to replenish their stock. It's a business. And if you think it doesn't happen here, just imagine. It happens everywhere. Well, let's just use a different country's example, Thailand. And it's a known industry that's been going on for decades. We had guests on, a husband and wife team. There were missionaries that got involved in doing this undercover work, helping the Royal Thai Police because it was such an issue. And here's the thing, Jimmy. We just don't talk about these things. And we never really get a chance to talk to an individual who's been through this that can carry on a conversation and talk about it in a way that you have been. And we're going to go into Jimmy's story in a moment. I want to caution you. Jimmy has agreed that he's not going to be really graphic about it, but it involves extreme abuse. It had a tremendous impact on him later in life, and he hit a point where he had to make some hard choices about how to make progress and develop the life he wanted. We're talking with Jimmy Toro. His website is Jimmy, Jimmi, Toro, Toro.com. He's also author of the book Heal. This is Law Enforcement Today Show. Don't go anywhere. I promise you, we'll be right back. There's only one official Facebook page for the show. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and be sure to click like. What do you get when you combine social audio with social media all in one free app? It's called Breakout. Get it at letbreak.com. There's a free version for your iPhone and Android devices. Be sure to follow John J. Wiley of the Law Enforcement Today radio show and podcast. Use a profile at LET Radio Show. Get it for free at letbreak.com or at the App Store and Google Play. Return to our conversation with Jimmy Toro on the Law Enforcement Today show. Jimmy was sexually abused as a child, tremendously, and his graphic had a profound impact on him throughout his life. He's here to talk about what happened, how it impacted him, his progress, and his mission today. I'll give you a hint. You can get details at the website, jimmytoro.com, Jimmi Toro.com. Jimmy, without going knee-deep in the weeds, and tell us your story from start to finish.
You bet. So I was, as a young kid, I was caught up in a ring of ritualistic sexual abuse. Adults, pedophiles, creeps. These are adults who organize in some sort of ritualistic, evil religion, Satanistic type of organization. If you think of like Ku Klux Klan, where they all wear their white robes and they do their rituals around the cross and burn it, etc. Well, these are the same kind of folks who do similar things in their twisted traditions, let's say. And they organize and they have their meetings, and they literally do sacrifice children, and they literally do abuse children, and they do it because they love it. Now, from one way to understand this possibly is many of these rings worship who they call Satan. Whether you believe in Satan or not, they worship their Satan. And Satan's enemy, let's say, is God. And so they reason often that, well, the one thing we can do to upset God the most is to harm what is most valuable to God as they see it, and that would be little children. And so if they harm little children, they feel, okay, this is upsetting God, our arch enemy, the most. Now, I believe in some of that, but I also believe it's a little bit of a cop-out. I believe they are hardcore addicted to abusing children.
Uh-huh. I'm inclined to agree with you because I think it's when we talk about murders, for example, most murderers I dealt with would say, oh, it was an accident. I didn't mean to kill him. They always find a way to lessen their impact. So when you have an explanation, somehow it makes it in their mind less intense. It's still intense. It's still harmful.
Yeah, so they use their rituals, their robes, their all this kind of stuff, in my opinion, just kind of as a front to do their deviant deeds, let's say. And so as a kid, I was caught up in that, and from about age 3 to about age 8, I went through hundreds and hundreds of these awful traumatic tortures. I was buried alive once in a coffin. Well, why would they bury a kid and torture a kid in a coffin, dead in there, and then shut the lid on the coffin and proceed to bury it? Well, because they find more joy out of these extreme tortures, and they get off on doing these imaginative, crazy things to kids. And what makes it even more twisted is if you're that little kid, as I was, and you're pounding and screaming, and you pretty much exhaust yourself like you're going to die, and then they open the lid, right? Well, what do you see when they open the lid? You see adults laughing at you. That's just twisted beyond twisted. And they do kill kids. It's just horrific stuff. They will often target a family of kids and only choose maybe one kid out of the family, maybe two if it's a larger family. There were 10 kids in our family. Me and my sister went through this. It's, well, why would they do that? Well, because if I say something or my sister says something, but all the rest of the siblings say, no, this didn't happen to me, well, we don't become very believable, do we?
No. It's a protection mechanism. It's a way.
Exactly.
Here's I gotta interrupt because
sure,
so much of what you're saying it strikes at the heart of our brain and goes, I can't wrap my head around this. And I told people earlier on, as a retired police officer, I saw a lot of horrible things. I can't understand this. I do recognize what you're saying. And one of the things that people need to understand is when it comes to sexual offenders, rapists, it is a violent crime. And it is less about sex. It's more about domination and controlling and manipulating and harming another person.
Yeah, a pedophile once was interviewed and once basically he says, I am the master manipulator, meaning I manipulate kids and I manipulate adults. He says, I was a father, a brother, a son, etc., a husband, and nobody knew that I was sexually turned on by 5-year-olds.
And that's just stomach-wrenching right there, hearing that conversation.
Absolutely, and they will talk about a child or a kid no different than they talk about a ham sandwich. And the ham sandwich is an object that fulfills my need when I'm hungry. And this kid is an object that fulfills my need when I want to dominate, control, and sexually get off in this twisted way.
And they kill the victim quite often because it's eliminating evidence and it's eliminating possible testimony against themselves. And that happens with adults and children alike.
It does. It absolutely does. They kill them for that reason, but they also kill them for they enjoy the kill. They enjoy the blood. There's when a kid gets, or even adult, but these kids, they get absolutely frightened. Adrenaline rushes through their blood, and if any of you or your audience have heard of adrenochrome, you starting to hear some of that now come out in the news. It's adrenaline-laced blood, and some of these sickos actually drink the blood, and they get a certain high out of it. So if they could torture that kid and get that adrenaline going in that blood, and then drain the blood and drink it.
Jimmy, how does someone go through like this and then pick up the pieces and say, okay, I've got to live my life, and this is not the life I want to have?
Well, that's a great question. Unfortunately, many adults who've been through this become hardcore addicted to alcohol, drugs, pornography, etc. Many become suicidal, homeless. Many of them go. It ruins their whole lives, and then they die, and it's so sad. And it kind of makes sense that if you're a little kid abused this horribly by this many years by your parents, you have no safety to go to. Your body literally will shut that in and store it, and you will suppress all that memory, most likely for decades. And in my case, it all came out in my literally last year, 59 years old. And I had to deal with that. And we can get into, how do we deal with this type of trauma if you want to go
I'd like to. I want to ask you a question before we do that.
Yeah.
Hollywood portrays that victims who go through childhood sexual abuse, they wind up being troubled kids. They're teenagers. They're breaking the law. They're in with bad crowds, whatever it might be. Was that the situation for you, or were you like a straight shooter?
It was not the situation for me. I have no idea why I did not get addicted to all kinds of things and get in all kinds of trouble. I have no idea why. I'm so grateful I didn't, because I have so many friends. I have friends who've been abused too, because it's my story, and as I get out, I get to meet people who've been through similar situations, and most of them were not as lucky as I. Most of them are really troubled.
Most of them have really horrible lives, and
yes, they do.
The one thing I wanted to get at, and I'm not asking you to pat yourself on the back, although there's a temptation to do that. So many people believe, and this is one of the things we'll talk about when we return. They believe one of the warning signs you need to look out for is changes in behavior, all of a sudden running with a rough crowd, all of a sudden involved in using drugs, alcohol, in trouble, grades, the whole 9 yards. What we want to talk about is, that does happen with some kids who are sexually abused, but not everybody. And we want to talk more about Jimmy's story. And when we return, this is the Law Enforcement Today Show. We're talking with Jimmy Toro. He was sexually abused as a child, and it's really graphic, and it's really long-term. He's here to talk about the impact on him, his journey, his progress, signs people need to be aware of, and his mission today. His website is JimmyToro.com, JIMMI Toro.com. That's spelled Toro. He's also author of the book Heal. This is Law Enforcement Today's Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. What is the Haunting or Not podcast? It's a free podcast that takes a different approach to ghost stories, hauntings, and cases of demonic forces. Husband and wife podcast hosts mix comedy, facts, and a healthy dose of police evidence skepticism to help you decide, are these hauntings or not? Helping you decide what's real and what is fake or an overhyped exaggeration. From world-famous cases to lesser-known reports, they talk about them all in the Haunting or Not podcast, available for free on most podcast platforms. Or do a Google search for Haunting or Not podcast. It's the Law Enforcement Today show. I'm John J. Wiley, joined by special guest Jimmy Toro. Jimmy was sexually abused for years as a child. He's author of the book Heal, as spelled H-E-A-L. His website is jimmytoro.com, J-I-M-M-I Toro.com. Jimmy, I really appreciate you talking about this because there's no polite way to have this conversation. And you've handled it all very, very well. What we talked about towards the end is the stereotypical signs we look for of sexual abuse with children. And that wasn't the case for you. What are some of the things that people, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, concerned neighbors need to be aware of?
What happens to these kids is they tend to close up, and if something happens to them and they do not have a place for safety to release it, they will store it, and they will close in. They often become trouble kids. They often take like 90-degree turns. They seem happy and life is good and the socialization with other kids is normal. Then just kind of out of the blue, all that stops. And you can see these early signs. And also another thing to note, if you're thinking that your kid may have been abused or this, realize that the possibility is that your kid was 90-some% was abused by somebody that kid knows. So think of family members, relatives, friends that come over. Start there, and that'll get you some progress.
Well, when they say that, if you think it usually happened, and to trust what they tell you. Especially the younger child, the more truthful they are, because their minds just don't work like that, and they don't.
They do not lie about this stuff.
No, what's the old saying, Jimmy? People don't pretend to be upset and disturbed, they pretend to be happy. And when children start talking about being sexually abused, they'll use terms that work for them, but they don't come up with that on their own. They got exposed to something by somebody.
Yeah. Believe the kids. Definitely believe them.
And protect them. Make sure it doesn't happen anymore. And with your story, we know that was not the case because it involved your parents. At what stage in your life did you really start being impacted this and saying, I got to do things differently? I need help.
Well, when all these memories started coming back in my adult years, like I mentioned earlier, it comes back with a vengeance. It is the most awful thing. There's a lot of different opinions from different professionals about how to heal from this kind of stuff. There's people who talk about body work, see a psychiatrist, yoga, this or that, breathing techniques, et cetera, et cetera. And you've got to figure out how to heal. And in my case, the way I healed was I was able, with the help of a great psychiatrist, I was able to literally go back to those memories. Now imagine if you're like a bus driver, the adult you, and there's like 100 little yous on your bus, and each one of those little yous represents a moment in time when that little boy, in my case, was actually abused. There could be hundreds or thousands, depending on how many years and how often it happened. You literally have to go back to each one of those traumatic episodes, which I did, and you have to find that little you in the act of being abused, and you have to figure out the emotion. What was that little kid feeling? Was it scared? Was it suffocation? Was it lost? And you got to connect with that. And when you do, you will feel every bit of it as an adult, and it is awful. And you have to go to that little person, and you have to help that little person find safety. It's literally rewriting the story. It's literally changing the past. And it's magical, and it's wonderful, and it works. It almost seems like it doesn't work because it's so magical. But you can go back to that little child, and you can help that little child find safety. Get out of the place. Maybe the little kid wants a sword, can fight back. Maybe the kid wants to just be, taken up to a room that's floating above the earth, or whatever the kid wants to imagine. In many cases, the little me would, want to freeze the perpetrator who was grabbing me. In one case, I was grabbed in this one room, going to be taken to another room, and I knew what was going to happen to me in the other room. I did not want to go, and these adults were just screaming at me, grabbing me, and to change the narrative, that little kid shocked me, and he and I escaped out of there, let's say, and we found safety, and there was no revenge or anything. It was just a solemn moment. Sometimes I would help that little kid just leave out a side door when nobody was looking, just walk for miles and miles and miles, hugging that little boy, because that's all he wanted.
And how old were you when you started this process?
Well, so when the memories came back, I was 59. And I figured out how to do this process. It didn't just happen overnight. It took a bit of figuring out. And sometimes going to find that trauma, that traumatic, that kid being traumatized, let's say, sometimes that was really hard to do. Other times I found the kid right away. And each time that kid found safety, it surprised me. I didn't go as an adult with a preconceived idea what this kid should do to find safety, but I whispered in his ear, "What do you want to do?" Once these other adults were grabbing him, and he wanted to freeze him, and this female grabbing me, she literally just froze like in a block of ice. Sounds magical, but it works.
I have a feeling that this would be extremely frightening for the patient to go through.
Oh, it is, and I think many people don't heal because it requires that you go back to that awful event that happened to you and feel everything. It is awful, and many people don't. Most people in life don't march towards pain. Now, do they?
No. I'll be the first one to tell you. I've been through enough. I don't want to voluntarily revisit stuff like that.
Well, you got to, in my case.
Yeah, I think you do. I think, and knowing your case is a lot more extreme than mine, one of the things I had to learn how to do was I had to learn how to accept that these things happen and that I survived them and I did the best I could. And that's part of my DNA. It doesn't mean I'm where I want to be. It means I can accomplish great things in spite of. I want to change direction a little bit because I know a lot of your life as an adult now is driven by what you went through. Tell us what you do.
Well, I'm an artist. I've been an artist, painter, oil painter full-time my whole life. And I've recently started a nonprofit called Rescue 11, rescue11.org. And our purpose is to go into communities and make communities aware that these creeps are right in their community. We set up clubs at high schools, and the high school kids run these clubs under our direction, and they connect with different people in the community: law enforcement, legal, political, religious, social, therapists, other nonprofits, in an effort to make the community aware that the tactics of these predators and the fact that this is going on right under their noses, and that's the whole purpose of Rescue 11, and that's what I spend my time between being an artist and doing that.
And your website, JimmyToro.com, is that primarily about your art and your book?
It is. Yes, it is.
Well, it seems to me that you got a lot of talent. Number one, I can't write for nothing. I try. I really do. But sitting down and writing a whole book, forget about it. I always thought when I retired from police work, I'd do one of two things: write the great American novel and open an Irish pub. One or the other or both. And I didn't do either one. So your website is JimmyToro.com. That's spelled JIMMI Toro.com. You're also author of the book Heal. When I say heal, is that your healing journey? Is that what it's about?
It is. The beginning book talks all about trauma, how it works, how it operates, how to deal with it, etc. The last half of the book is, I went through hundreds of these, but the last half is 22 stories of me actually, what happened to me, how I went back into it, and how I healed from it.
And very quickly, how would you describe your life today?
I am so fortunate, having gone through that I have an opportunity to reach out. If I can rescue one kid or warn one parent, I will have lived a fulfilled life.
And the one thing you would tell every parent, other than if your child tells you this, listen to them, believe them, what would be the one thing you'd tell them in closing?
I would tell every parent that right in your community, it is highly likely that these predators are hiding right in plain sight, plotting to hurt and harm and even steal and kill your child. It's not an overstatement.
I agree with you 100%. Jimmy Toro, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. I appreciate it. Your website, JimmyToro.com. That's spelled JIMMITORO.com. Again, thanks for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Today's show. Very much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for helping get the message out. I really appreciate that.
I'd like to thank our guests so much for coming on the Law Enforcement Today radio show. The Law Enforcement Today radio show is a nationally syndicated radio show broadcast on numerous stations once a week and growing. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, please do me a big favor. Tell a friend. I'll be back in just a couple days with a brand new episode of the Law Enforcement Today radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.